Have you ever wondered what would happen if a seemingly insignificant person dared to challenge an entire empire built on arrogance? In a world where human worth is measured by fame, fortune, and glittering appearances, what if someone quietly walked in, not needing spotlights, not seeking grand introductions, but carrying only an unwavering heart and an unshakable belief? That's exactly what happened at Aurora Platinum, a place once reserved only for the brightest names among the elite. A place where applause echoed not for true talent, but for sheer power. And it was there, on a day no one ever anticipated, that every prejudice, every towering wall of arrogance came crashing down beneath the footsteps of a girl clad in a faded jacket and wielding an old, battered gun. Emma Carter, someone whom no one paid attention to when she first arrived. An ordinary face among hundreds adorned with superficial glamour. It was that very name, that very face, that rewrote history with just 10 flawless bullets. No need for excuses. No need for pity. No need for grand declarations. Only a steady, unyielding silence. Only the relentless pull of a trigger, each shot piercing straight into the hearts of those who once basked in their own conceit. Today, I'll take you back to that day. The day an ordinary girl made the most powerful bow, their heads were turned. The day Aurora Platinum was forced to relearn its very first and most vital lesson. True worth doesn't come from where you were born, but from how you fight to carve your path through this world. In a world where status was the currency of human worth, what would happen when an ordinary girl dared to step into a place reserved solely for the untouchables? Aurora Platinum Shooting Club, with its ceilings soaring into the clouds and chandeliers glittering like 1,000 frozen stars, stood as a sacred ground for the ultra-wealthy, where every bullet fired carried the weight of family honor and prestige. Amidst all that overwhelming opulence, Emma Carter stood still. Her faded jacket and the battered Springfield M1A slung over her shoulder looked like a raw, jarring crack across an otherwise flawless wall. Marcus Gray, the front desk attendant at Aurora, cast her a glance, as if confronting a piece of discarded trash picked up from a street corner. His voice, cold and metallic, sliced through the air. VIP lanes aren't for maintenance staff. A soft, sneering chuckle hissed through the room like wind squeezing through a crack. Ryan Wells raised a mocking eyebrow. Chloe Hart whispered something derisive, and Brandon Lee merely let out a low chuckle, the kind that told you humiliation had hit its intended target. Emma said nothing. No words of protest. No flash of defiance in her eyes. Just a single, calm, deliberate motion. She pulled out a silver card, its corners scratched and worn, and slid it through the electronic scanner. A sharp, decisive beep sliced through the stifling arrogance hanging in the air like a knife. The silver glass doors swung open, and Emma stepped forward, her head held high, her stride steady, a silent declaration written with every step. Beyond that door, a world was waiting to crush her beneath disdainful stares and the chill of unchecked privilege. But Emma had no idea that in just a few minutes, it would be that very world that would have no choice but to bow before her. The Aurora Platinum Shooting Club was vast and majestic, a palace forged from light and glory, where even the marble statues seemed to echo the luxury and legendary names that graced its halls. Every shooting lane bore the name of a distinguished family, every bullet cradled like a sacred vessel of honor. Amidst the glittering brilliance, Emma Carter was a muted shadow, surrounded by eyes heavy with silent scorn. Her faded jacket and battered M1A stood out like an undeniable blemish on a canvas painted too thickly with vanity. On the 8K livestream screen, thousands of eyes from around the world watched her every move, hungrily awaiting the moment she would crumble in disgrace. Ryan Wells, clad in a perfectly tailored black suit, leaned back and sneered, his voice dripping with casual cruelty as he quipped, "Good luck to the janitor." Chloe Hart raised her phone, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen, capturing what she assumed would be a picture worth mocking. Brandon Lee stood leisurely from his seat, a smirk of disdain playing across his lips. Emma walked through the sea of unspoken judgment, like a lone traveler forging upstream against the wind, each step steady against the cold, hard marble beneath her feet. No frantic gestures, no flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. The air itself grew heavy and oppressive, like a dying tree under the desert sun. But Emma did not falter. Every small movement of hers seemed to carry a silent vow. That was not glittering clothes or polished appearances that defined a person's true worth. Within Emma's heart, she carried more than just an old rifle. She carried a solemn promise that she had not come merely to survive. She had come to leave a mark so deep it would never, ever fade. Lucas Ford, son of the Ford Dynamics Weapons Empire, shot up from the VIP seating as if a prince had descended to issue a decree. Each of his footsteps echoed steadily against the marble floor, carrying the arrogant confidence of someone who was used to winning by virtue of his last name alone. His tailored black jacket clung perfectly to his frame, the family crest glinting under the chandelier lights, a silent reminder that this was no place for the nameless. Lucas marched straight to the shooting lane, stopping deliberately closer to Emma than necessary, radiating that invisible pressure only those born to thrones knew how to wield. He tilted his head slightly, flashing a half-smirk dripping with challenge. If you want to step into Aurora, you have to go through me. If you win, I'll leave this place immediately. But if you lose... Lucas lowered his voice, his gaze slicing across her like a cold blade. You'll disappear, and don't ever set foot here again. A wave of murmurs rippled through the grand hall like an underground current. Some sneered, some raised their phones to record, but most simply stood there, waiting for the moment Emma would be crushed under the weight of legendary names and scornful stares. Emma Carter said nothing. No explanations. No grandstanding. She quietly stepped toward the shooting bench, placing her weathered Springfield M1A onto the stand with a practiced reverence that made the atmosphere suddenly tighten. Her hands, long, slender fingers moving as if cradling a sacred memory, checked the rifle with a breathless calm. Emma's hazel eyes locked onto the target 50 meters ahead. No tremor. No flicker of fear. In that moment, she was no longer just a girl in a faded jacket. She was a warrior, a living oath made of blood and memory. Aurora Platinum Shooting Club seemed to hold its breath. Under the shimmering chandelier light, no one could ignore the quiet, unshakable steadiness radiating from the girl they had once dismissed. Lucas Ford tightened his grip on his custom $60,000 rifle, the smirk slowly fading from his lips, replaced by a wary focus he never thought he'd have to summon for a so-called outsider. The air froze solid, like a lake before a storm. All the sneers, the pitying glances, the mocking smiles. Now they all receded into a silent circle, surrounding Emma, waiting. And at the center of that circle, the girl with the old gun and the unbreakable heart could hear nothing but her own breathing. In that moment, Emma Carter wasn't just preparing for a single shot. She was preparing for a revolution. The Aurora Platinum Shooting Club was frozen in absolute silence. No one blinked. No member dared to exhale. Everyone was waiting for the moment when honor, resolve, and pride would stand against each other. Lucas Ford, a man raised on privilege and raw power, stepped forward, one hand firmly gripping his gleaming custom rifle. He wielded it like an extension of himself, smooth, ruthless. The sharp crack of his shot tore through the air, the bullet biting dead into the target's heart. The electronic scoreboard flashed the result, 9.9. A few hesitant claps began, accompanied by smirks laced with contempt. Lucas hadn't hit perfection, but he knew such numbers were more than enough to crush the weak. He fired again, second, third, fourth shots. 9.8, 10.0, 9.9. The scores gleamed on the board, each one a hammer blow aimed at breaking Emma's spirit. The live stream audience held their breath, and the comments flooded in. It's only a matter of time before she cracks. Emma Carter approached the shooting bench in complete silence. Each slow, deliberate step sounded like the beating of a war drum, carrying every ounce of courage rooted deep within her heart. She placed her weathered Springfield M1A onto the stand, lowered her head slightly, a gesture gentle yet laden with sacred conviction. A shot rang out, short, sharp, decisive. The screen lit up with the score, 10.0, the perfect bullet. Aurora Platinum gasped. A tiny crack had appeared in Lucas's seemingly invincible wall. Emma Carter didn't need to say a word. With just her first shot, she had begun to rewrite the rules of the game. The Aurora Platinum Shooting Club suffocated under a thick, heavy atmosphere as Emma Carter stood silently amid hundreds of scrutinizing stares, the weight of the Springfield M1A heavy in her hands, but her spirit light, like an unspoken challenge. When Lucas Ford completed his round with near-perfect shots, the arrogance on his face burned like a confident flame. He looked at Emma with cold disdain, as if she were just a smudge to be wiped clean from this hallowed ground. But Emma did not retreat. She did not waver. She needed no excuses. All she needed was her rifle, and a heart that nothing could shake. The first shot rang out, sharp and cold like a blade slashing through Aurora's pride. 10.0, the perfect score. The scoreboard lit up like a silent slap across the faces of those who had laughed at her. Lucas Ford squinted, the mocking smile wiped from his lips, replaced by a crack of doubt creeping into his gaze. The second shot, 10.0. The murmurs fell dead silent. The third shot, 10.0. Clapping hands froze midair. The fourth shot, 10.0. Those who once sneered now stood mute, as if stripped bare by the fierce, composed pride radiating from a girl in a faded jacket. Lucas Ford struggled to maintain his calm, but his hand, tightening around his rifle, began to tremble. The fifth shot, 10.0. The sixth shot, 10.0. Each breath in the room grew sharper, quicker. The smug smiles that once danced in the crowd's eyes gave way to confusion and dawning fear. Each of Emma's shots was not merely the squeeze of a trigger. It was a dagger slicing deep into Aurora's false pride. It was a silent war cry, proclaiming that true worth could not be stitched into tailored suits or stamped on a diamond-studded membership cards. The seventh shot, 10.0. The eighth shot, 10.0. No one in the grand hall dared to move. Even the fingers clutching live-stream phones hovered hesitantly, because what they were witnessing was no longer just a shooting match. It was a quiet but ferocious overthrow. Lucas Ford, the living symbol of Aurora's smug arrogance, could only stand there and watch Emma, as if staring at the crumbling ruins of an empire he once thought invincible. The ninth shot, 10.0. The sound of beating hearts seemed to merge into a single rhythm of fear and awe. The 10th shot, 10.0. The scoreboard flashed, 100/100, a perfect record. Emma Carter lowered her rifle with a calm grace, as if placing a final, definitive full stop on the era ruled by privilege and bloodlines. No screaming, no grand declarations, just the razor-sharp composure and unshakable determination that carve a new line in the sand. At Aurora, from this day forward, only talent and a heart of steel would earn the right to cross. The Aurora Platinum Shooting Club fell into utter silence as the number 100 out of 100 flashed brilliantly on the scoreboard, an unwritten verdict descending upon all those who had once sat arrogantly upon their thrones. Lucas Ford stood frozen, his rifle slipping from his hands and clattering onto the bench with a sharp, metallic clang. The smugness once etched into his face was now hollow, like spent fireworks after a lost battle. Cold sweat broke across his temple, trailing down in long, shameful streaks under the blinding chandelier lights. Emma Carter didn't utter a single word. She simply stood there, her dark brown hair fluttering slightly under the soft whisper of the air conditioning, her sharp hazel gaze sweeping across the crowd, not to challenge them, but to remind them, today, an era had ended. She walked slowly toward Lucas, each step echoing against the marble floor like the final drumbeats of a fallen empire, causing the audience to hold their breath, frozen in place, no one daring to speak, no one daring to move. The once proud faces seated in their luxurious leather chairs now appeared strangely small. The expensive suits and glittering diamond crests now looked like empty trinkets, stripped of all weight and meaning before a girl armed only with integrity and a heart forged from steel. The regional director of Aurora, the man who once proudly stood behind Lucas Ford, hesitated for a brief moment. Then, with a face stiff as stone, his gravelly voice rang out across the hall. From this day forward, Emma Carter is officially recorded as the holder of the most perfect shooting record in Aurora Platinum's history. At first, the applause trickled like raindrops onto a cold, empty floor. Then it grew, surging into a roaring storm, sweeping away every shred of arrogance and hollow pride that had once rooted itself here. Emma did not smile. She did not bow. She simply stood firm, a new landmark, a lighthouse for those who had once been drowned beneath the tides of privilege and delusion. Lucas Ford, once the symbol of invincibility, was now just a silent failure, standing amid the applause, celebrating a new legend. He bowed his head, and with a broken whisper, as if dredging up the last remnants of his pride, he said, "I have lost." And in that moment, Emma Carter hadn't merely hit the bullseye. She had pierced the very heart of an arrogant system. And with 10 perfect bullets, she had written a legend that would be remembered for generations to come. As the final echoes of applause faded, Aurora Platinum was no longer a sanctuary for the arrogant. It became a silent cathedral awaiting judgment. The once proud faces, the ones who had sneered and mocked, now stood exposed. No place left to hide from the girl in a faded jacket with an old rifle who had rewritten all the rules. Suddenly, a woman's voice broke through the crowd, trembling, choked with emotion. "I'm sorry, Emma." All eyes turned toward the sound. Mia Hole, the girl who had once tossed a mocking note at Emma's feet, now stood there with tear-reddened eyes, her voice cracking as she bowed deeply before Emma, her regret laid bare for all to see. One bow in earnest. Then 2. Then 3. Those who had once reveled in arrogance stepped forward one by one. The champions, the darlings of the elite, those who had lounged in VIP seats, now standing in a long line, bowing their heads in apology. The once cold hall now roared like a storming sea of emotion. Arrogance shattered. The masks of privilege and pride crumbled at the feet of a girl they had once deemed unworthy. Lucas Ford, once the proud symbol of invincibility, now faded into a pale shadow of himself. He walked toward Emma, his face ashen, his once fiery eyes now hollowed out with shame and remorse. Lucas dropped to his knees, his trembling hand laying his rifle at her feet in absolute submission. His voice broke with a sob, no longer able to hide behind false pride. "I was wrong. I'm sorry, Emma." The air stood still. Everyone watched, witnessing the fall of a once mighty temple of arrogance before their very eyes. The regional director of Aurora, once an enthusiastic supporter of Lucas, now stood up. His voice trembled slightly, but rang firm across the breathless hall. From this day forward, Aurora Platinum will no longer judge its members by fame or fortune. From now on, only talent, courage, and character will be the standards by which we honor one another. This round of applause was not just a celebration. It was a cleansing, a liberation. Hands that once wielded power now came together to honor one name. Emma Carter, the girl who, armed only with an old rifle and an indomitable heart, had awakened a sleeping world. Emma didn't need to say a word. Behind her, the scoreboard still blazed brightly. 100/100, new record holder, Emma Carter. That was the strongest answer. That was the declaration that needed no voice. Aurora Platinum, once a fortress of privilege, had now stepped into a new era, an era where true worth could no longer be bought with money or dictated by bloodlines, but could only be earned through genuine talent and an unbreakable spirit. 1 month after that fateful day, Aurora Platinum had completely transformed. The grand halls that once echoed with arrogant laughter now resonated only with the weight of respect. The The central scoreboard, which once displayed only the names of the proud and privileged, now gleamed with 3 words. Emma Carter, the first holder of a perfect record in the club's history. No more lavish ceremonies. No more lights reserved only for the wealthy. Instead, Aurora Platinum had become a new lighthouse, a place where true talent, courage, and strength of character were honored. The old photographs, once drenched in hollow prestige, were moved into a modest gallery, and at the heart of the grand hall, hanging silently yet shining brighter than anything else, was a portrait of Emma. Simple brown hair tied back, a faded jacket, cradling the old Springfield M1A, her gaze holding the fire of resilience and a sky full of hope. Beneath the portrait, only a single line. Emma Carter, the one who changed destiny with perseverance and integrity. Visitors from around the world came to Aurora Platinum not just to marvel at an unbroken record, but to stand silently before story. The story of a girl who had no golden heritage, who wore no inherited glory, but with her own hands and a pure heart, had brought down an empire of arrogance and forever changed the history of this place. They stood before the portrait, saying nothing, only listening with their hearts to the echo of 10 gunshots that not only shattered the targets, but also tore apart the old prejudices that once cloaked Aurora Platinum. And they understood Emma hadn't just hit the bullseye. She had struck the very soul of a generation. Years may pass, new titles may be awarded, but rather, the name Emma Carter would forever remain the golden bullet engraved in the hearts of all who believed that true worth could never be measured by fame, but only by an unyielding spirit. Emma hadn't just changed Aurora. Emma had left behind a flame, quiet, yet eternal, burning within us all. When I first saw her step into the Aurora Hall that day, I didn't see a competitor. I saw a misfit with her faded jacket, worn-out shoes, and a rifle that looked like it had been salvaged from a junkyard. I scoffed. I thought, she'll be crushed here. This isn't a world for dreamers. Amidst the glittering chandeliers and the smug laughter of people like me, I never imagined I was about to witness history. Her first shot rang out, sharp as a cold blade. I raised an eyebrow. A bullseye? Probably just luck. Her second shot. Her third. Each time her bullets sank into the target's heart, I felt something inside me crack. Sweat began to bead on my forehead. I whispered to myself, "It's fine. She'll stumble eventually." But she didn't. She moved like a silent storm, sweeping away every ounce of arrogance in that room. By her sixth shot, my palms were slick with sweat. I couldn't bear to look directly at the scoreboard anymore. I saw the glances around me changing, no longer mocking, but stunned, breathless. She wasn't just hitting targets. She was striking at the rotting pride we had built our lives upon. When the final shot rang out, when the scoreboard blazed 100 out of 100, I felt as if I had been stripped bare, standing naked before hundreds. There was nothing left to cling to, nothing left to excuse. I had lost, utterly and completely, from the very soul outward. I lost the moment I believed a person's worth lay in their lineage, not their heart. I bowed before Emma Carter, not because anyone forced me, but because for the first time in my life, I understood that nobility wasn't in gold medals or the Ford name. It was in how a person stood tall in battle, fueled only by belief in themselves, even when the world turned its back. That day, I learned a lesson I had never known. True worth is not in what you wear. It's in how you stand against contempt. Greatness doesn't need applause. It needs endurance, integrity, and a heart that refuses to bow. Sometimes, you have to lose every mask before you can finally see yourself. Emma Carter defeated me, but in truth, she saved me from the blindness of my own arrogance. I will never forget that day. And for the rest of my life, every time I hear the memory of those 10 gunshots, I will bow, not out of shame for losing, but out of gratitude for finding true dignity in my heart. 1 year after that fateful day, in the newly renovated grounds of Aurora Platinum, I encountered her, Emma Carter, at the West Wing hallway, where her portrait was displayed under a warm light. She stood there, hands tucked casually into her jacket pockets, her once piercing hazel gaze now softened, tinged with peace. She was looking up at her own portrait, the very moment she had changed, a generation captured forever. I approached, my polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. Each step carried the weight of a year's worth of remorse. When I was just a few steps away, I paused and took a deep breath. She turned her head, meeting my gaze, not with surprise, nor with coldness, only with a calm, wind through the trees kind of acceptance. I bowed my head, not as a formality, as a genuine act of respect. "Emma," I said, my voice more choked than I had expected. "Maybe I don't deserve to stand before you today, but I wanted to say thank you." She said nothing, only tilting her head slightly, as if listening beyond the words themselves. I clenched my fists briefly, then exhaled, a breath that seemed to purge every last remnant of pride. "You didn't just tear down Aurora's fortress. You struck my heart. Thanks to you, I learned that true worth cannot be bought, cannot be inherited. It must be earned with steadfastness and integrity." A gentle smile crossed Emma's lips, soft, yet unshakably strong. I looked up, meeting those eyes the same ones that had once shattered me, now offering me the chance to stand again, not as a pretender, but as a man. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," I said. "I'm only asking for a chance to change, to live up to the lesson you taught me." Emma nodded, slowly but firmly, and in that moment, with no need for further words, I knew. This was no longer a battle between winner and loser. This was a rebirth, one soul who had won through integrity, and one who was learning to rise again from the ashes of arrogance. I turned away, lighter than I had ever felt, knowing that this bow was not an act of humiliation, but the beginning of a life I had never dared to live, a life of authenticity. And in that fleeting moment, between the warm-lit corridors of Aurora Platinum, I realized Emma Carter was not just a legend of the rifle. She was the legend of awakening. There are victories that need no applause. There are medals that never need to hang around your neck. Emma Carter taught us that you don't need power, fame, or a dazzling appearance to prove your worth. All you need is steadfastness, perseverance, and a heart that refuses to bow before prejudice. The lesson we take from this story is clear. Greatness does not come from where you are born. It comes from how you rise, how you stand against the world, and choose never to give up on yourself. Never judge someone by their appearance, and never underestimate the power of a heart that refuses to surrender. Emma Carter's story reminds me that in a world full of noise and imposed standards, sometimes a steady silence, a simple act of perseverance, has the power to change the destiny of an entire generation. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong, if you've ever stumbled under the weight of others' doubts, remember Emma Carter. Remember this. As long as you do not fall in your own heart, no one can stop you from reaching the summit you deserve. And if you love stories like this, stories of courage, resilience, and unwavering belief in oneself, don't forget to hit like, leave a comment to share your feelings, and subscribe to Talk Story today. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We ignite faith. We remind you that you are strong enough to change the world.